Hi, Roman. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Hey Ben, good to be here. Good to be here. I'm doing very well. It's summertime in Berlin, so happy mood for sure. How about yourself?
Yeah, exactly the same, exactly the same. Out of the winter depression.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Cool. I think a great place to start just be to get an overview of your background, what you're up to. Yeah, I guess what your kind of expertise areas are.
Happy to. Customer service is definitely kind of the title of my movie. So I started off as a customer service rep at an outsourcing company something like 9.5 years ago, and have worked through various operational roles there. So on the support function, stepped into operational leadership, leading first teams and then full lines of businesses or departments, and then switched over. So from working at an external customer service partner, switched over to be a little closer to the products and sort of creating the customer experience from scratch. And so my last two jobs were one with Delivery Hero out of Berlin for the Foodora Food Panda brand. And most recently and currently I'm with GetYourGuide as head of operational excellence, where we do, so my team specifically does outsourcing and business intelligence elements, as well as tooling, forecasting, things like that. And GetYourGuide is the hands down the best platform for great in-destination experiences. So if you're on your journey and if you're sick of sitting at home for the long and tedious lockdown and you just want to get out, GetYourGuide is your key to amazing experiences.
Nice. Okay. One thing I did want to ask you. So right now at Get Your Guide, you're like head of operational excellence. What does that mean actually?
Yeah, I was brought in to GetYourGuide to, I think, for lack of a better phrase, like, put customer service into fighting shape, so to speak. So GetYourGuide has very ambitious plans, so very ambitious growth, not just plans, but is also executing upon them. And scaling customer service just comes with the territory. Customer service has lots of different monikers and names. Scaling operations in an excellent way, that's what we're about. So again, going back a little bit to what my team does, specifically, we look ahead as to and try to anticipate to the best of our ability the customer demand. And then we set up customer service teams and operations across the world to match that customer. And then in the process, we equip them. So we make sure that they have the right sort of digital tools in order to handle customer requests. And then we also look at the business intelligence side of it, because there's just lots and lots of ground to cover in customer contacts. So if you get 1 million, 2 million, 3 million customer contacts a year, you want to make sure that you have the right data structures in order to look at them and understand them.
Okay. Wow. Cool. So that makes a lot of sense. I think it's perfect to talk to you now because we're interviewing multiple people about scaling and like different ways that help a customer support team scale as well.
Mm-hmm.
So like serendipitously, this fits into that really well. Like a lot of the things you mentioned there is like outsourcing is your expertise and your
Mm-hmm.
experience so far. And the topic of today is about outsourcing. So that's
What do you
perfect.
know?
I think to move into like a bit more of the topic of conversation, like outsourcing, I guess, well, just to start at the very beginning, what do we mean by customer service outsourcing? And is that the same, like, is it pretty much a standard definition?
Yeah, so outsourcing manifests itself in many different ways, I think, across any part of the company. So in the context, so I think the definition, the dictionary definition is something like bringing in a third party in order to extend the amount of workload that you're able to execute on. So in the context of customer service, that means bringing in an external partner in order to handle your inbound, outbound contacts, potentially sales over phone, back office activities. But it's going out and like grabbing more talent in order to execute faster, I don't think is a customer service exclusive thing. So if you're a localization team, you need translators, you go out and get freelancers. If you're a legal team and you have a bunch of legal workload, you go out and get external counsel. I've seen whole startups in Berlin externalize their recruitment processes. So it's definitely not exclusive to customer service, but it has a very specific flavor to it, where there's just a huge world to it within outsourcing for CS.
Interesting. And so is there different levels of outsourcing, like you could in customer service specifically? Would you just outsource, say, one part of it, or would you normally outsource that?
Yeah, I think it really depends on what your mentality, what your approach is. There are purely digital products that are so easy to roll out and scale into new countries. Like you need you need a legal presence potentially, but you don't need like a full office. You don't need like logistics with it. And so in those kinds of cases where those digital products are so easy to use and their self-service is very well developed, you can potentially outsource the whole lot. You can just place it to an external partner, and that's fine. If you have a more complex setup where just really complex issues occur because you're going after a bigger footprint, maybe you're serving customers in many different countries, the issues that get funneled up are just so complex that you need teams that are in very close proximity with the product teams, with the marketing teams. And so it comes down to your individual needs and where are you in your maturity as a company and your maturity as a customer service operation, I think.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So you could outsource like a particular tier of customer service, like the easy stuff to handle.
Exactly. I think that the most classical approach is first line contact, so to speak. So I run into an issue, I go to help center, I find your phone number, I'll call you, those kinds of calls. But then when it turns out after some troubleshooting and isolating of the issue that this is a core product issue and this customer service rep just will not be able to offer the customer a solution, it needs to be escalated to someone who's going to follow up and explain and maybe even reach out back to the customer and say, hey, like, could you give us a little bit more color around it? That's where usually you go for that in-house. But I've also seen I think up to 4 tiers where with each tier, things get progressively more technical to the point where some of them are almost like associate engineers. And then again, if you have enough scale, you can outsource part of your tier, right? Like you can keep 5% of your tier in-house just as the center of excellence, but then the rest of the 95% of your footprint can be outsourced.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So like, why would someone want to do all of this, like to outsource? So like, what are the pros first, the benefits first of outsourcing?
Yeah. So I think like looking through my somewhat biased lens of my tenure with GetYourGuide, it's really, if you're in a position where, due to customer demand, you had to do 10 things a day, and now you need to do 100 things a day. Outsourcing is a clear winner in that degree, because there's a whole company, a whole organization just built around executing customer service in a really efficient and excellent way. Like everyone, from recruiters to HR to anybody else, is just built and hired and trained in order to do customer service really well and support it. So scalability, I think, is the biggest pro. Again, if you're growing and you anticipate that you're going to continue to grow, flexing or extending your coverage with outsourcers just gives you security. And I'll bring in an example so that it's maybe a little easier to understand. Your recruitment teams can only be so big. So if all of a sudden your customer service teams needs to go from 10 to 100 people, your recruitment team will not 10x, or let's say it can't, right? So maybe, again, you can look into outsourcing your recruitment, but then I think that only solves the bleeding for that specific moment. But if you plug in an outsourcer and you bring in some knowledge and you transfer some knowledge, you bring them into the fold of your company, they can continue to scale independently, sort of, obviously making sure that you're still in tandem about your communications. But that's, I would say, first and foremost, scalability. And I think that folds really well into meeting customer expectations. So again, you need to scale, or likely you're growing because customer demand is growing. Customers are loving your product and they're using it. And if your workload increases by an order of magnitude of 10, but your customer service does not, you just mathematically can't meet customer demands. So you're too slow, you're not available enough. Nobody likes having issues, but then not being able, like after you've committed a certain part of your wallet to using a product, and then you can't even reach those wonderful people who then ruined your day. That's the worst, right? I think the second pillar is just, once they're able to reach you, it's loyalty. So I think customer service exists for one very specific reason. It's to keep customers loyal. It's to bridge the gap between what the company says they sell and kind of the experience that actually occurs. So I think those are definitely the two. The third one, and I think in most articles or any kind of literature, cost is always the first one. I'm putting it on number 3 because if you do it in an intelligent way, yes, you're able to become more cost efficient. Now, I think there's like a legacy understanding of cost efficiency in customer service, which is we need like customer service, they're bleeding money, they're costing us so much, we need to beat them down, we need to make sure like that it's more difficult for customers to contact us so that we get less contacts, and then we need less people, and that, so that's, I think, a very like outdated way of looking at it. Yes, it costs things, but it's not like customer service people come to work and like, today we're going to make some problems that we're going to solve. No, it's like these problems exist because this is how you built the product. So I think the way that I like to think about cost is, if you're a brand has like a relatively modern mindset and you believe in loyalty and you believe your differentiator is that you treat your customers way better than your competitors and kind of the rest of the world, and you really want to invest into loyalty, that customer obsession needs to be sustainable from a cost perspective. So the same customers that love your product in the first year, if you then get really stingy with how you invest into their experience in year 2 and 3, they're going to churn and go away very quickly. So that's how I see it. And I think if you do it in a really intelligent way, and again, an outsourcing company, like there are benefits to the whole company running to the tune of customer service. Obviously, if the whole company does one thing exceptionally well, they're going to find efficiencies that you simply can't. Your main thing is not to do customer service. Your main thing is to produce and ship and deliver the product that you set out to achieve to your customers. Customer service is one of the functions that you must execute. So I think cost definitely is a big one, and you need to look at it in a fully loaded way. So look at how much it costs, like what is the share of the rent of your office that goes to customer service. Like you don't just look at payroll to payroll, you look at the fully loaded costs. And like I think the classic like issue in startups is there's no meeting rooms because we run out of space every 2 months or every 3 months because there's so many people. So truly look at the holistic cost of running customer service in-house, and that's where I think benefits start surfacing very quickly. And then look, I'll go for the fourth one, and then I'll pass the ball back to you. So I think if you're bringing in outsourcing folks, you're bringing in talent density in the world of customer service. It depends on how you set up. You can bring in folks kind of that are completely new to customer service. That's your choice. But you can, one of your criterias with your outsourcing partner can be, I only want you to hire people that have X amount of experience in customer service. So they must have already been in your company for 6 months. Or 50% of my workforce there, I would like to be already experienced in other projects that you hired them for. So internal transfers only. So whatever the case, you're bringing in competence and you bring in experience, because an outsourcer has many clients, at least the bigger ones. Some of the biggest ones globally have thousands of clients. So if you're, again, a relatively fresh company, you're still building out your products, it's very, very likely that they already have seen the pitfalls that you haven't gone through yet. So you don't need to do like the full trial and error. You have a great consultant basically in your outsourcing partner who can come in and recommend solutions or more efficient ways of doing things, or who can also verbalize their needs. So I think point 4 is competence, definitely in the area of customer service.
Wow, cool. Yeah, it sounds great. We'll jump in a little bit to the potential downsides, just to hear that from you as well. But there's so many. I think for me, it is a no-brainer to things you're saying about a company with experience creates like efficiencies on their own, and then they have also the talent, the expertise, and that's like a great reason to outsource anyway. But then especially when you're going through one of those kind of jump scale periods where you've just had an influx of new tickets or something like that overnight. I think it was like Loom was recently, they were on our podcast talking about over the pandemic period jumping up 10,000 tickets a month overnight or whatever, and just having to deal with that suddenly. Bridging that gap is like a great reason to do it. But also with the cost and the talent and it's also a great thing to do when you're not mid-scale.
Yeah, because so you want to grow and meet and capture that market share, but you also don't want to bleed your pockets dry. And especially with the recent shifts, and I think like a forced popularity of working at home, you're able to scale super quickly. Because now, if let's say Ben, you and I are running an outsourcing company out of Berlin, we can also engage anyone who's sitting in Germany at home, wherever, so they don't need to commute to our office anymore. So if we have our recruitment and HR functions work very well, we can flex like 1,000 people working from home by next week, right? So it becomes very interesting, I think. Like you said, like this 10,000 tickets anecdote, I think I've heard it like 100 times in the Berlin scene. You grow, you're doing everything right, and then boom, you have this backlog, and everyone in the company is doing tickets, like the CEO is doing tickets as well.
I think what they did was send a video to everybody and say, look at this graph. We've just had a huge jump in tickets. Please bear with us while we sort this out.
Yeah, that's the way to go, I think.
Yeah, just clear communication can solve everything sometimes. One thing I read in an article about the benefits was also what you mentioned about having expertise, but potentially your outsourcing partner being able to help you generate revenue or maybe innovate from the contact center.
Yeah, I think that folds. Yeah, it's along the lines of this kind of fourth point that I brought up, which is they may have seen organizations that are, or operations that have a similar structure to yours, but are much more mature. So for maybe they're experienced with a client whose company is already 40 years old or 30 years old, for example, and they've already gone through plugging in the bleeding, and now they're looking into value added. And so now you're actually able to like offset cost or generate revenue through upsell or cross sell. And it's super easy because they already have the expertise to it. When you start shifting gear into value adding and revenue adding, you need trainers and you need like internal competencies on how you do that over chat or phone or whatever else. So if no one in the organization in-house has sales experience in customer service, all of a sudden you need to start hiring these kind of sales professionals. And so again, in an outsourcer, you just say, hey, do you have sales? Like picking an outsourcer, one of your criteria can be that they have sales competence, for example. You may not need this in the next 6 months, but like in 2 years or 3 years down the line, you may. And then at that point, you just say like, hey, can we borrow like a sales trainer for 6 months or something? And then they just bring it in and this person sets everything up for you, like potentially free of cost or as is, because the outsourcer has a potential to then grab a bigger chunk of your business by you placing your trust and your operations into sales with them.
Yeah, cool. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It makes me think about, just you say like having a sales trainer, does that kind of go the other way? Say I'm scaling all of a sudden. How quickly can I hire an outsourcer and then train them in my product? Is that a problem sometimes?
Yeah. So unfortunately, like I say this with no venom, right? Like with no bad feelings, but usually growth comes first. And then you realize, okay, we're underprepared for this growth from a customer service perspective. And so usually outsourcing projects begin, quote unquote, a bit too late. So when you're already running into a backlog situation, it's probably, you can't outsource from today to tomorrow. But then if you know that you're going to continue to grow, at least it is within your plans, it is within your strategy to grow, invest into it. If you can, take your time with it. By taking your time, I think if you have the professionals internally to run this, you can do this within let's say 2 quarters start to end, with lots of homework of making sure you're documenting everything, making sure that you're passing on knowledge to them, you're able to like show them something more than like a Google Doc with some like messy notes. But if you have a team of 5 customer service agents in-house, you don't need to write anything down. Like everyone just knows what to do. So everyone just knows like, yeah, if the customer has an issue, just give them a refund and a whatever, $10 voucher. If you bring in 5, and everyone brings their own like flavor to it. If you have 500 people, you like the flavor that you bring on average to the customer becomes so inconsistent that you need to kind of standardize, and you need to make sure that the knowledge has modules and people are able to learn them and grasp them. So back to your question, I think like how quickly depends on how many people you need. It depends on what languages, what markets you're serving. It depends on how complex your product is. Again, like pure digital products that are super easy to scale, and or companies that do one thing really well, I think fairly easy. But then if you have a product that tries to cover lots of inventory, taking GetYourGuide as an example, lots of very different inventory, heterogeneous markets, very like complex system, you need time to do it properly, because otherwise then you may have scale, but then your outsourcer is just not as good because you haven't invested enough into them. And the same would be, by the way, if you were, let's say we're a German company again. Ben, you and I are going to run a company by the end of this podcast. Let's say we're a German company. We want to expand into the US. Then we just go and open up an office under our brand and logo. We just create a new entity in the US. You all still need to show them something, right? Like you need to teach them something. They're not just going to come in and become these amazing Ben & Romans company employees. You need to train them on something. And so in that case, you would also need to document your knowledge, and you need to like create ways of passing on that knowledge to them. So very much the same problems. It's not an exclusive job for outsourcing. As you scale, you just need to do your homework, I think, appropriately.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, everyone you hire has to be trained, and that's not an easy job anyway, is it? This way, at least you can train a few people, and hopefully they can train.
Exactly.
Yeah, it does seem like a no-brainer to me to at least be part of everyone's sort of customer service strategy. Why do you think more people don't do it? What are the common either misconceptions, but also what are the actual cons and potential risks?
Yeah, risks, I think the keyword is spot on. I think just what we were talking about, that's the competence. If you underinvest into it, the competence may not be super high. And so but what do we mean with underinvest? We don't have, let's say, any documentation. We don't have a knowledge base. We don't have a repository of knowledge that someone that works in customer service can go and look into and find how to solve problems or how to understand the product. We don't have a very structured training. We just bring people in and like hope for the best. We have no way of measuring their success. So we don't know if they're meeting customer expectations or not, because we're not capturing it correctly. We're not reporting on it correctly, whatever it may be. We don't know what the customer demand is. So every day we come to work, we just do a Hail Mary and just hope for the best. So all of that is not investing sufficiently into the success of your outsourcer. And then what happens is that they just become apathetic to your customers' needs because you don't care about them, so they don't care about your customer. And so inversely, you have great knowledge documentation, you have folks that are on site, you have great trainers who can bring you into the mindset, use an outsourcing agent into the mindset of the company, understanding the customer, understanding the value proposition of your business, and just transferring cultural values. If you can't have a process, you can't have everything documented. Everything changes rather quickly. So then in that case, through the fog of war, you need principles and you need core values that you can fall back on. It's like, when in doubt, how should I really be treating the customer? Yeah. So if we're transferring all of that really well, and then we're also measuring success really well, so we can also forecast our demand well enough to be available to customers to make sure that the workforce is matched to the customer demand. If we're doing all of that really well, the risk of your outsourcer being apathetic to your customers' needs is null. And in many ways, because they live in a microcosm of customer issues, like the only thing they're exposed, or primarily what they're exposed to in your company, is customer issues. They're likely to be even more passionate than you about solving them because this is what they see every day, all day long. Again, a risk to manage, a risk that can be mitigated really well in just investing in success, invest in their success early on.
I like that. I like the kind of bringing them into your kind of core values and principles and bringing them into your culture. What if I guess they're not dedicated to your team? They have 3 cultures they have to be in.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. And I remember this from working within and out. I remember asking my managers at the time, like, how I have like an identity crisis. Like, where do you want, whose team am I part of? I think if you're working with a really mature outsourcer, they are chameleons. Like they absorb your culture and the values, and they become almost closer. Like if you look at it on a scale of, here's my outsourcing company and here's the client and the client's culture, they come a lot closer to the client's culture. And so they're just, because then they come into work and they're, again, if you and I have done our homework and they come in, they're wearing GetYourGuide t-shirts, they have whatever GetYourGuide stickers, they have GetYourGuide pens, there's core values on the walls, there's like branded logos of whatever else. So their whole environment is GetYourGuide immersive, let's say, or Ben and Roman's company immersive. And so you just instinctively are curious and you're part of it. This is it. This is your identity in a way. So you just make sure to extend your brand to them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I did a little bit of research into what are the common cons, and one of them was security. What about our customers' sensitive information? Is it going to be safe?
I think, yeah. So the security thing it's a bit of security is a continuous, it's a mindset, like it's a lifestyle. It's especially in the days of cybersecurity, it's something that you need to stay on top of. So I think it's always relevant. But I will say that the risks with outsourcers are more, again, they're a little old news, so to speak, because obviously, let's say like we have an operation of 5,000 outsourced employees. It could very well be that a couple of them, as they're exposed to customer data, they're going to get some ideas that are not very savory. So that will also happen if you have an in-house operation. It's because people are people, right? There's bad actors. It's not like within the outsourcing world, there's only bad actors who are like these people looking for data leaks. It's totally not true. I've read enough and I know enough in the community and I've seen that it happens on both sides. I will say that especially in-house, things are usually a lot more relaxed around security. So think about it. None of us have been in offices for a while, but think about going back to the office and you have like your own access badge. And then somebody behind you forgot their access badge. Like, hey man, I forgot my badge. Can you let me in? And you're like, yeah, sure, whatever. Come on in. You've never met this person before, but you're tailgating, like you're letting the stranger into your business.
Yeah.
And the stranger can go and sit down in the kitchen somewhere and help themselves to a coffee. If the floor is like big enough and your company is 600-700 employees, no one's gonna, like, maybe it's cleaning staff, maybe it's like a guest of some sort. And then in-house, everybody goes to lunch at the same time. And nobody ever locks their computers. When was the last time you locked your computer going to get a cup of coffee somewhere 30 meters away? I can tell you, like working in-house, nobody locks their computers because everything's relaxed. Yeah. And so you let somebody in, everyone's gone for lunch, your computer's unlocked, this person just pops in a USB key and installs like a back. I'm giving people some bad ideas right now, probably, but I'm saying, like, I think it's definitely accessible. Like, it's very probable that you create a security leak through your just very relaxed attitude. Yeah. In the outsourcing world, especially the bigger players, if they don't treat security almost more like harshly or more seriously than you, they know they won't survive. If you have a really big footprint and you have a huge operation, it could be that as an outsourcer, this client's business is the only reason you can operate in this region or this city. So again, Ben and Roman outsource 5,000 employees. If they get a data leak, the amount of trust that is lost so quickly, it just evaporates. So you shut down a site with 5,000 people and you have to transfer. It's going to be costly to you, the damage to like the human kind of psyche, like, and the outsourcer goes out of business, like it's the worst days. Yeah. That has happened before. And so I think outsourcers have adapted by meeting the highest standards of security possible. At least obviously there's a range. I'm not saying every outsourcer is there, but they look at things like the credit card industry, like what sort of security standards do they set? They look at making sure that there's no tailgating. There's a mindset of, if someone's behind you, they don't have their badge, please politely show them to the front desk where they can get a guest badge and sign in. Mm-hmm. So you always know who's going in or out of your operation. Whenever you walk away from your computer, you always have to lock it. It's been so drilled into my brain that if I'm home alone, like going to the kitchen, I sometimes like just lock my computer and walk it away. Wow. It's about creating an environment where at every corner and every sort of potential risk or outlet is managed or has some sort of thought put into how we can mitigate that. I think the modern day outsourcer, especially working with a relatively, young company, a couple years old maybe, and everyone's just cool and relaxed and working hard, obviously, but still attitude is quite lax. The outsourcer, I think 9 times out of 10 will be more secure.
More secure, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I think people ask us about our product as well. Like, are you GDPR compliant? Are you? Mm-hmm. Yes, like everyone asks us that question. So yeah, we really care about that and we make sure we do and are really secure, because exactly, like, the risks to us if messing up is much worse than internally.
Yeah. GDPR is like a complex. I'm very happy that it happened though, because it's like it created a very clear incentive, I think, to care about your customers' data. So I'm a big fan. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's like the security conversation sort of leads me into the final question I had, which is how do you make sure you choose someone who is a good outsourcer for like even security question? How do I know that you are the secure one and not the bottom level of the pile?
Yeah. Yeah, I think like the simplest way, because there's such a big range of topics that you need to be aware of. Really, the easiest way, especially if you're in growth and you're going to continue to experience growth, bring in someone who knows outsourcing, at least like even one person who can then, for lack of a better word, like evangelize or just like socialize that concept internally and educate stakeholders on what it means to outsource and what are the risks. It can be a full-time person, it can be a consultant. I'd say, so I'll throw that out there. There's plenty of great consultants and also just great talent out there who know outsourcing well. If you're set on sort of learning it your own way, that's fine. That's a choice. I think the proper way of going about it is to run a request for proposal campaign. So where you're sending out like a questionnaire with, taking us as an example, we had something like 150 questions in that questionnaire, and they span from what are your numbers regarding employee churn? What are your numbers regarding internal employee satisfaction? What are your diversity metrics, right? What is the split of gender equality within your teams? And at which layers? Is the leadership also diverse, or it's like the bottom layers organizations are 50-50, but then the top are like pure male boards, for example. And then it spans to what are your security standards? There's very specific like industry accepted standards that you can be certified for. So how old are your certifications? When were you recertified? What is your ability to scale? So how many people can you hire in X language per month, for example? And you capture all of that information and data, and then you put it through a sort of a scoring system, and you come to, okay, like I have from the list of 20 BPOs that outsourcers that I've reached out to, maybe 2 or 3 are really a good fit for me. And it doesn't mean that the other ones are bad outsourcers. It just means that they cannot satisfy your criteria and your needs. And you can make that questionnaire as detailed as possible. I think like more is more in this case. Don't be shy of taking your time. Like to create that request for proposal form alone can be a month's worth of work or like a quarter's worth of work, because you need to you need to go to every single team in customer service, sometimes outside of customer service, to understand also if we were to go external, what do these people need to know? Like how complex is the knowledge setup and stuff like that. And then there's even minor questions like, but that are still quite important. How close is your outsourcing site to the nearest international airport? If you're outsourcing internationally, you need to be on site. So I think in 2019, I had something like 120 flights. Like, so lots and lots of being on site and again, investing and setting them up for success. So I think being very diligent in your selection and in just capturing that information that is relevant to your success, that is the way to go. And to the original point of bringing in someone who knows outsourcing, they have done it before. So they won't have to sit long and think about the stuff that they need to ask. They'll just, in a week or two, they'll be good to go. There's a very methodical way of doing it in a way. And if you do it in that way, I think the chances of your success are super, super high.
Perfect. It's been great hearing from you. I think it's really nice to hear you just so clearly know the subject and have so much like expertise in the area to walk us through this. So like, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, enjoyed it.